Well, hello. We are here with your Sales SOS podcast, and it's December. So we're thinking about the new year. Thanks for joining us on live. And today, I have your crew with you. And hang on a second because we got a little noise. All right. Today, I have your crew with you. We are only three, but we're mighty. I've got Chris Bowen, Mike Simmons, and I'm Liz Hyman, your host, the head of your crew. I don't know what I am, the captain. I must be the captain. Today we're going to talk about how do you get into the new year effectively. So we're going to have four sections. If you're going to stay with us the whole time, we're going to talk about what does it mean to plan for the new year? What should we be doing? We're going to talk about leveraging your company's history to make your plan. We're going to talk about expanding your client base, and we're going to talk about setting goals effectively. We're going to avoid my favorite word, wagging. Have you guys heard me talk about that? We're going to talk about wagging, wild ass guessing your sales team. So, I already did it. We haven't even gone live. We haven't even started our podcast, and I've already cursed. All right. Are you guys ready to jump in? I don't know if we have a crew, if we have anybody with us, but we'll just get started. So let's start our very first segment. Hi, I'm Liz Hyman. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. Today we're going to be talking about strategy, and I'm here with your crew, Chris Bowen and Mike Simmons. Let's just dive right in. Let's talk about strategy because this is important. We're planning for the new year. And I don't know about you, but when I talk to companies, often the CEOs, they're like well into January before they really have had time to plan. They're kind of coasting, hoping things will come together. So before we like dig in to what people should be doing, let's talk about what we're doing. What are you guys doing in your own company as you start planning for the new year? Mike, you want to start? I know this is Mike's favorite topic. He likes it almost as much as sales process.
Almost. It's close. It depends on when you catch me, which one's the leader in the clubhouse. But number one, my planning period starts in September, October time period. That's when I start looking at, hey, what does 2025 or what does the next year look like? In years when things are rough or things are busy or just things are stressful or whatever, then it will happen at the latest Thanksgiving. And I take that week as a time to reflect and then start looking forward. So if you're this late in the year, December 13th, and you're going through this kind of planning process, or one of the people that Liz was talking about, where you start getting into the plan in Q1, pick up your calendar right now and write down on September 30th of 2025, start my planning process for 2026. Your business will thank you. Your people, your teams will thank you. Your customers will thank you. My process already started. I've got things planned out already in place around where we're focusing time, energy, and attention from a products and service perspective, how we're evolving ideal customer profile, where we're ICP that we're focused on, and we're executing the plan.
I love that. Chris, what are you doing? What are
Well,
you? And I agree with you, Mike. Um, it's late. It's late to be doing it now, but it's never too late. Like if you haven't done it, start now. But I think October is a really good time to start the process. And I don't think it's a one-day process. I think it takes time. Chris, tell me what you're doing.
I start in October, so I usually try to start with what hasn't worked, and try to figure out why those things didn't work. Is it something around the offer? Is it something around the ICP? Is it something around pricing, timing, anything else? Because we had a lot of things that stretched this year, from when I thought they would end up closing to when they actually closed. And so what is it that we could have done? What is it that I could have done? What is it that anybody could have done to make that a little bit different? Then look at also what worked And is there any way to build on top of that, either through the exact um, issue or the exact area that we were having success, or something else, right? Like, so just trying to figure out where should we spend our time growing from things that we know worked but may be able to be improved, and which things didn't work. And if there's things that didn't work that we can improve, then we should do that. If it's things that we can't improve, then let's try to avoid those in the future.
I think those are really great place to start. I think. Well, let me talk about what I do. But I think this looking back thing is really important, and I want to talk about that in the next segment. What am I doing? I'm actually a little late this year. We started in October, but we've been doing it in little tiny bites, so we're still working on it. And I this year have really dug into the numbers more than I typically do. So for my company, because it's a small company, I'm not just doing the sales planning, I'm also doing the expense planning. Um, and hang on a second, because I think Renee just joined us. I don't know how to get to her. There she is. There's Renee. Yay, Renee's here. Um, Renee, we're talking about planning and what we do for planning for the new year. So I'm just talking a little bit about what I do. So I'm really looking into the numbers, and I think it's important for a sales organization as you're doing your planning. What are you paying for that you don't need to? What costs are frivolous? What costs are, do you have to expend? Uh, and how do you make sure that the investment that you're making in sales and marketing, how do you make sure you're leveraging them on the other side? And how do you make sure that um, you can hit the numbers you have with the resources you're willing or able to expend? And that's what I'm in the process of right now. So we've written up most of the plan, but we're really struggling with what are the resources that we need most to achieve the goals that we have. And that I think is hard. I think it's really hard for most companies to make a good judgment about, do I need that extra salesperson to hit that number? Can my salespeople do more than they're doing to hit that number? Can I do more than I'm personally doing to hit that number? What extra support do I need to hit that number? And I think that's a big part of planning. But I want to step back. Well, let's let Renee talk about what she's doing first.
I mean, I think my conversations right now are very similar, right? We're talking about scaling up. There seems to be a good bit of focus on sales right now, in the positive direction. We've talked about this year was a little bit sluggish, and it has been for most of the year. I feel there's a lot of momentum picking up around, and people are ready to either make the changes that they've been hesitant to make, or they feel their own personal market picking up some. There seems to be a lot of trying to project what the needs are going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. And my conversations are a little more right now, not trying to project out 12 months, leaving some open room, right? And trying to scale into the needs. So trying to figure out what we need to get to milestones along the way to then trigger the next, like if we hit this, then that. So that seems to be more of my conversations right now.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of that too. Mike, what are you going to say?
Yeah, I think this is, again, I know in this area of the conversation we want to focus on the strategy, like what's our strategy for planning, and we talked a bit about, hey, one is timing. When do we go through the timing piece? The other one is what is it that we ultimately want to accomplish? Like, what's this future thing that we're
Right.
working toward? Where are we going? Do we understand what the goal is? And that goal could be just what we get done tomorrow, or it could be the goal that we get done at the end of next year, or the goal that we have at the end of a given quarter. And I think this piece that Renee highlighted is really important. That timing, when you start talking about fiscal year or annual planning, is really driven by some old thinking around what are we going to accomplish and what are we going to plan for in a given year. A number of organizations have shifted into quarterly planning and looking at what are we going to do from a quarterly perspective, and then how do we iterate on it. Intel was a client of mine way back when. They would look at an annual plan. They've moved a couple of years ago into quarterly planning because the speed of the market was happening so quickly. So have a goal, have an objective, have something that you want to achieve. And once you understand what that something is that you want to achieve, make sure that you've aligned inside your organization on that thing that you want to achieve. That organization can be you as an individual or your team. If you're missing either of those things, you've not earned the right to start putting together a plan to achieve the objective because you just don't know the objective. So leverage your covey, begin with the end in mind, understand what that objective is, understand your timeline on that objective. So those are just a couple of other things I would add.
So a lot of companies do planning for this time of year. What numbers do we hit? What numbers are we going to hit? How much resource do we need, right? So that's what we were just sort of talking about. But Mike taking it to that next level, which is being strategic. So being strategic might just be, we want to still have this company next year. What things need to happen in order for that to be true? Or maybe we want to continue to grow and expand who we are and who we reach. And if that's true, we need to understand, what does that expansion mean really? And how then, what needs to be true in order for that to happen? And how do we plan around that? So the difference between planning and strategy, and it's really interesting because we had this plan today, and I just watched somebody who I can't find the video who was talking about this yesterday. So it was kind of funny timing, but a plan is about activities. A strategy is about that higher level vision. We're going to build a new plant. That's an activity. It's not strategic, right? It fits into. Wait, Renee, you're.
I was going to say, it's not why we're building the new plant.
Right. The why we're building the new plan is what matters. The building the new plan are the activities that happen to make whatever that is. So if we want to quadruple our production, there are lots of ways we could do it. We could build a new plant, we could outsource, we could do all kinds of things. But first we need to think that we want to quadruple our production. But before we do that, we need to understand, why would we want to do that? Do we want to serve more market? Do we just want to get richer? Like, what is our what are we doing? What's this high level thinking? And then the activities matter, but truly, activity without strategy is chaos. And you guys have heard me say that many times, but I think that when we plan activities, or we just plan for goals. We need to hit this 10% increase in revenue over last year. That's our goal. That's not a strategy, right? 10% increase is not a strategy. It's just a number.
Yeah. Well, I think also when you're looking at your strategy, if something changes relatively dramatically from the previous year, you should explain that to why are we making this shift in this way. I found that people are really, really good when you give them the information instead of treating them like they're children and aren't going to be able to understand it and don't get it. Sometimes you'll get really good ideas around other things that may impact that you can leverage. But if you keep it within just a small cadre of then you're hoping that it will work out that way. I've tended to find that people will act like adults if you treat them as such. So
Mike, I know you have something to say. Hang on one second, because I want to drive that point home. So when I was working for Miller Heiman and I was facilitating the Miller Heiman program, strategic selling mostly, I was working with some of the top companies, the top sales teams in the world: Hewlett Packard, Coca-Cola, NCR, Kodak. I know it was a very long time ago. Johnson Controls, right? Even some of the top accounting companies. And every single program, I had to stop for 20 minutes out of the 2 days so I could listen to the salespeople tell me how corporate was doing everything they could to undermine their sales. They were, getting rid of a product that was everybody's favorite product. They were, right? They were prioritizing things nobody wanted. What?
changing the comp plan.
Right. Because no one understood why this was happening, they weren't on board to do it. So it's having the strategy is important. Sharing the strategy is equally important.
Yeah.
Mike, what were you going to say?
I think there's something that we should go a little bit deeper into and really distinguish the difference between strategy and tactics.
Yes.
Because I
Yes.
think there are a lot of people out there who, like you were saying, they'll focus more on the tactics, the work that's being done, and just keep doing it and doing more of it without actually seeing how it aligns with the overarching strategy, and ultimately getting comfortable starting to say no to certain work because it doesn't align. So, do you mind if I share my
Oh,
definition of
no, this
the
is a
two?
hugely important topic. What is the difference between strategy and tactics?
Okay, so the way I would put it simply is that strategy is how. Strategy is the how. So if, let's say, I've got a goal, an objective that I'm working to accomplish, a growth goal or an adoption goal or whatever it is, my strategy is my three-pronged approach that I'm going to apply to get there. Like how, and I would put that into different buckets. And the how could be focused on a number of different things. It could be new products, it could be new services, it could be growth within existing accounts, it could be improved metrics, whatever it is. Like your strategy is up to you. And too often,
Okay, I'm going to stop you for 1 second because what you've just said is we have strategy at different levels. So you have your highest overarching strategy about who your company is,
yeah,
who you want to be, how you want to impact the world, how you want to be seen. But then you say, within that, I'm going to make some goals. And then you have strategies within that to create goals. How are we going to do this highest level thing? Well, we have these goals. Okay, then how are we going to achieve each of these goals? But then, so that's the how. Then let's go to the tactics part.
yeah. So
Can
just
hold
keep
on
going,
one
Renee.
second?
Yep.
I just want to add a phrase in that I think it's a little bit consultant speak, but it really does help explain the strata that we're kind of moving through, and that is planning and the how that Mike just described are applied strategy, right? Like so you have strategy,
There you go.
applied strategy, and then tactics, right? And I think that helps people because they need. There's that one more category that gets really nebulous without a label.
Yeah, and there's a number of different things that will happen when you come, especially when you add more people into the conversation, right? You have people who have a different perspective of what the thing is that we're working toward, or this whatever the goal is, the mission, the view on how we're going through and doing it. There are all of these other things that end up happening as you add complexity into the discussion. So when you add that complexity and you add people in, make sure that as a group you agree on what it is, your definition of some of these terms, whether it's definition of what a goal is or the objective or what the specific objective is, your definition of what strategy is or what strategies you're focused on, what lens you're looking at it through, where you're shining your light. Just to kind of simplify, I like to look at it in the context of goals and then actions. Actions are the strategy, the how, and then metrics are the tactics, the work that's done on a daily basis that you hold yourself accountable to doing. And then when you do the work should yield a result. And if it doesn't, you may need to either fire yourself from the work because you're not capable of doing the work, fire the work because the work is not working, or make some adjustment to either the strategy or tactics. So to break it down, goal, objective, strategy, how, tactics, what? What's the specific thing that we're doing? Tactics may change frequently. Strategy should not. If your strategy is constantly changing inside your organization, you're leading your team inappropriately. You're moving too fast in certain areas. And I understand that we all want to move fast and we all want to get things moving forward, but let's be really clear. Is it the bucketing of the actions, strategy? Is it the bucketing of that work into these areas, or is it the actual work that we're talking about? And let's not confuse the two. That's my view on this stuff. And I think people confuse it a lot and they get caught up. And what ends up happening, if you're confusing it inside your organization, what ends up happening is a lot of your people have a long to-do list and they just have more work that they just keep adding to that to-do list. And they don't know how to eliminate certain work from that to-do list. If you have people who are working through a big to-do list and don't know how to eliminate it, You have a challenge of the team not understanding what the strategy is that you're applying to achieve the result.
So part of what a strategy should do then is help us prioritize our activities. So if the activity is not moving us toward the priority and the goal, or moving toward the goals and the strategies that we've set in place, then that is an activity that needs to be deprioritized.
Yes.
And we as leaders tend to forget about what my dad used to call the stop investments. When we were doing key account planning at Miller Hyman, we always included what, if you're going to do this, if you're going to go here, if you're going to prioritize this, what are you going to stop doing? And I think that's harder than any other thing we ask people to do.
Yeah, it's no
Well, I
different than
think
when you.
also-
It's no different than when you promote somebody into a more senior role. You have to tell them this stuff that you used to be really good at. You can't do that anymore. This is now your responsibility. That's somebody else's now, right? In a lot of cases, like you may be able to give some guidance, but you don't want to become the crutch.
On the stop, start, keep thing, the stop part, I think, is one of the reasons it's incredibly hard. Is I think often the people making the decisions don't understand how things are integrated. I'll speak from the marketing point of view. You could say, oh, we're going to stop these things, like what seems like busy work, right? And the wheels just stop turning because they have to be in place. Like there are just so many, like you can't not optimize your website. You will be invisible to people. You can't not, like they're just, you can't not continue to publish fresh content to your site. You will become invisible to people, right? Like whatever your other goals are dependent on that foundational work, and it's a lot of stuff, and then what you're doing and driving people to becomes what's integrated into the CRM, and then that affects sales, right? So it's more integrated than it's ever been. Still not enough, right? But more integrated than it's ever been, which means there are far more dependencies and complications and complexities to trying to stop things. And I think that's under recognized.
Right. And I think though sometimes it's about and we're going to switch topics here. I want to just kind of wrap this up, but I think it is sometimes about we're going to go after this market, which means we're going to stop addressing this market. We're going to focus on this product, which means we're going to let this product die. We're going, right? So how are we realigning? You can't just stop doing the foundational work. You can't just stop prospecting, right? Because you're busy closing business. They're all priorities.
Exactly.
You can't just stop managing your brand because you want to do something else. But we often have to narrow the scope in one area in order to get broader in another or to grow in another. So,
Liz,
but it's really important at this point, as you're doing your planning, that you have some vision about where you're going, some priorities in place, some strategies to get there that you're now going to plan around who's doing what activities to get that to happen. It's hard. I think we make it sound like, oh, our yearly planning, that's just so easy. Everybody just come in with your list and tell us what you're not. That's not strategic, right? Strategic is starting with where are we going? What do we know? And which is going to take us to the next topic that I want to talk about, which is where have we been and how does where have we been help direct where we're going? What do we need to understand from the past? So stick with us and join us in our next episode. And we're going to talk about understanding the past to understand the future. So thanks for joining us on our first episode of this series on strategy and planning for the new year. Okay, you guys ready? We're going to go into our next segment. Hi, I'm Liz Hyman. Whoops, let's start again. Hi, I'm Liz Hyman, and this is the Sales SOS podcast. And in this episode, in this mini series, we're talking about strategy and planning for the new year. In this episode, we're going to focus on understanding or using the past and understanding the past to plan for the future. I think it's really important, and I think it's a very hard thing for a lot of people to do effectively. So let me introduce the crew. We have Chris Bowen, Mike Simmons, and Renee Bigelow. And we are going to walk you through this understanding the past. So let me kind of start and explain a little bit more about what I mean. Very often our strategy looks something like, and I said this in the last episode, we're going to increase sales 10%. Ready, set, go. Everybody go increase sales 10%. But what we don't do is figure out, how did we get where we got to last year? Right? Who bought what? Who were our largest clients? What did they buy? What could they have bought that they didn't buy? Which industries were the easiest to sell to? Which industries were the hardest to sell to? What kinds of criteria make somebody not an ideal customer? What makes somebody a great ideal customer? Which customers could be buying more things? Like, what happened? What happened last year? Because that is the foundation of going, if that's what happened last year, and I have some ideas about this year, now I can build a plan. So that's what I want to talk about. I don't know. We haven't. I'm kind of throwing this topic out at them without much prep. But Mike, what do you think about that? What am I missing? Why is it important?
I don't think you're missing really anything there. I mean, we have to reflect. If you take some time to reflect and look through the rearview mirror, or look in the mirror and look at the data that we have, we could get an understanding of what has been our reality, and has led us to where we are. I forget the specific quote, but I'll find it while we're going through this. But there's your business is operating at the level that it is designed to do so. So if it is not operating where you want it, you've failed at design. It is performing in the way that it has been designed. So let's look at our data, whatever that data is. And if you don't have key performance indicators or metrics that you're looking at, then get some of those in place so that you know what you should be looking at. But I think you nailed it. I think this is where we reflect on what's important to us, and then start to figure out, of those things, what do we want to adjust and how do we want to adjust? And to the point that you made in the last episode, what needs to be true so that we achieve whatever the thing is in front of us.
Chris, go ahead.
No, I think I think one of the things you look at is, where was it that we wasted effort, time, and resources on things that we were either not likely to win or were absolutely had less than zero chance of winning, and was there a rationale for why we chased it, right? And sometimes you may chase things because, hey, I want to get my name known to that account in the future. We're not expecting to win this, and things like that. But there's other times when you're chasing things because your salespeople got happy ears and heard something that confirmed something, but didn't necessarily dig in deep enough. And next thing you know, you're spending a lot of resources on something that wasn't even really yours to win, right? You weren't really going to be competitive. So being able to understand where you fell down on those bigger efforts. Small efforts are going to happen here and there, but if you spend a massive amount of resources in certain areas, you need to be able to figure out, what should we do differently?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons, and I think this is part of thinking about what are we going to do differently next year. One of the reasons that we put a lot of resource into deals or opportunities that we're not going to win is because we have nothing else in the funnel. And if we can identify that we're doing that, then again, how do we strategize around not doing that next year?
Yeah, how much of that effort that you put towards that thing that you weren't going to win could have been put into prospecting, right? to the people that you actually should be selling to.
Yeah. Renee, what are your thoughts?
So I have a little bit different perspective to add another thought in with this. And that is, often, almost every year, every business I touch and that I've ever worked in has a new initiative, right? And there is a ton of effort that goes into that new initiative. And in the beginning, those things are hard. They're messy. There's a lot of experimentation. There's a lot of testing. There's a lot, right? And one of the biggest opportunities in that like applied strategy level that we were talking about in our last episode is to really look at what we did and take a lot of those learnings from what we did and refine that with some processes and systems, right, to make it easier and better. So, for instance, I have a client who's going to be launching with a CRM for the first time, like a real CRM. They've had it sort of in their service platform and things like that. It's going to hurt, right? Like we all know this. Whenever you launch a new technology, it's going to change the processes of how people work. You're going to think you need to do it one way. It turns out you got to do something different, right? That takes a little breathing room to figure out. I think in planning, one of the biggest opportunities is to really look at where those improvements can be made and say to people, we heard your complaints. We understand. Tell us again, like where you're wasting time, where you're whatever. Like it's not all about efficiency, but there are efficiency gains with the processes and systems. Those efficiency gains are, and again, I'm using some consultancy speak, but we're in planning and strategy, and that's where people bring in people to help, right, for these things. You're looking to build capacity to do the next new thing. So you have to make those refinements. And that's how you open up the space, right, and have time to do it. But to me, the fun part, like the really fun part is it's like having a jigsaw puzzle in front of you and organizing all the pieces and building out the frame and, working with the color, all these colors go over here or whatever. You start getting them to work together so that it comes into one thing. So if you did something last year that was a big initiative, how do you build on it? Or how does it help with the new initiative? So that you get like a 1 + 1 = 3. There is too much work in marketing right now for me to consider doing anything that's a one-off unless we have to do something new and we're going to build on it later, right? There's almost always something we did last time that can help assist getting it going, or that like we can cross into. It always needs to be a twofer, and that's where that like applied strategy helps you figure out like how do we elevate this to help this get off the ground, like that kind of work. So I hope that's another perspective to kind of add to it.
I think though it's important because when we start talking about new initiatives, so we tie it into this larger thing. We're going to do more of what we did last year, and we're going to add this new initiative. And again, where's the stop investment? You can't take the same number of resources, the same number of hours in a day, the same tools, and now say we're going to do more with what we have and we're going to do it well. Maybe once the technology is in place, you'll be able to do more with what you have, but in the process. So how are you planning for that? How are you planning to bring that new initiative based upon what you were able to accomplish next year or last year? How are you going to add a new initiative into this year and still accomplish what you did last year? I think that's a really important context for this.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I just had this we're all talking about these things right now, right? Like in our conversations, and I had this conversation yesterday, and I could see someone's like a marketing director. I could see their head just start to explode, like thinking like, how are we going to do all this? And I was like, no. Like they build, like it's incremental and it builds, and when we get this one done, it becomes a part of the next thing, and like kind of explaining how those things work together, and then those things together take this other work off of us and give us something we never had. And like it just feels, it can feel very overwhelming if you don't have these initiatives don't somehow overlap, or you get some systems that make it easier.
I think it's also if you get into where you're only discussing the initiative at the 30,000 foot strategic level, and you're not really breaking it down into what are the actions at the different roles that have to be engaged in it. What is it that we need each of these teams to be able to do? Then I think it's easy to become overwhelmed. I think if you can break it down into where that responsibility, where those communications need to occur between those teams, then you start to make it a lot easier, because they're like, oh, I can do that. But if you wanted me to do this whole thing, I don't even know where to start, right? Because it's too overwhelming relative to their day-to-day.
Yeah, it's exactly how the conversation went yesterday, Chris. Like it was a marketing team that's going to start lead gen type campaigns for the first time, and it just was. And so I'm talking about multiple lead gen campaigns, and then you build out a nurture series, and that it establishes a whole customer journey. Essentially, their customer journey starts with people raising their hand to sell to them, right? And so we're going to back that up and get people to even move into consideration, and that just feels like this huge lift. I'm like, no, you've already, like, then when we broke it down, I'm like, you've already done all this. What you haven't done is just piece it all together, right? So it became a little less like the head was about to explode, like in a good way.
Especially for the people that are, for lack of a better term, more hands on keyboard, the doers, it can become really, really overwhelming because like, that's not what I do. I don't know how to do that, anything like, but you break it down and it starts to become more realistic, more tangible.
Like the thing that made the biggest difference is I said, no, you don't understand. For this kind of thing, we need good content. What you're really good at is good content. You just haven't like tried to capture a lead earlier, right? So you're going to do the content. I'm going to walk you through how we're going to do like capture the lead and nurture them and whatever. And and once you do it, it takes 50% less time to do it the second time.
Are they also prepared for the fact that they're gonna end up seeing, when they bring this in, they're going to end up seeing very likely lower win rates, right? Because now you're not just taking inbound leads, you're now going with outbound. You need to not compare them across the same set of metrics, because you're going to be in for, someone will end up being like, this isn't working. No, it very well might be. It's not going to work in the same set of metrics with the same goals.
I will not work with anyone starting lead generation if they've never done it before, or if they misunderstand it, unless they get on the same vocabulary and understanding that these are leads. And I basically walk through like total time and funnel, quiet phase, research phase, sales phase, right? Like that these are QR phase, quiet phase, and research phase, and we're trying to get them to sales phase. So your metrics don't even kick in until they actually get to the point where they raise their hands. You're establishing what your total time and funnel will be because you don't even know it now.
So let's take this back to this idea of looking backward to look forward. So what we're saying here, what Renee is talking about here specifically as her example, is this idea of how do we do the top, very, very top of the funnel, or the early part of the funnel. If all we've been doing is reactive selling, waiting for somebody to raise their hand and say they want to buy, and we're saying, but we want to grow, it's really hard to grow around reactive selling, around the hand raising selling. We need to now go out and look for opportunities. We need to go out and activate people who haven't raised their hands yet. So as we're looking at what we're doing now, if we want to grow, just saying we're going to grow 10% doesn't help. We have to figure out how we're going to do it. This is one way to look at where are we reaching people in the sales process, how do we reach them earlier, and how will our metrics change as we do that. I think it's an important, like, larger story that needs to be told. So when I sit down with my clients and we start planning, we do what I call a sales strategy. Here's the process that I go through. And I think maybe this will be helpful for people who are starting to think about this right now. So the first thing I do is say, what did you do last year? Who were your 5 biggest clients? How much did you sell to them? What did you sell to them? And then from there, you get the going forward. What could you be selling to them? So really looking at that top 20% of your revenue. Where did it come from and can it grow? And the next thing is to look at who are all of the clients that you're selling to. Are any of the people that you sold to last year, could you be selling a lot more than you're selling now? Looking for the growth opportunities in your existing accounts. So before I ever go out looking at how are we going to do more, I start there. And then once we've looked at that and said, okay, here's where revenue can come from, then I start looking at, where did you sell last year? Did you sell to schools? Did you sell to school districts? Did you sell to hospitals? Did you sell to hospital systems? Did you sell to government? Like, where did you sell and where was it easiest? It's really breaking down the individual areas of what worked and what didn't, which industries. which ones were most effective, which buyers were the best ones to start with, really digging into the what happened last year. And so I think we start going forward before we've really dug deeply into what did we do right, and what did we do wrong, which is what Chris was talking about a little bit earlier. What should we be doing differently? You don't know what you should be doing differently until you look at what you did last year. Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
I think one of the things when you were talking, when you're looking at it, when you say, "Hey, what was our best customers this year?" I think you really should break that down into the existing customers versus new customers, because are you selling something different to your new customer base than you were to your old customers, and you're just growing it from that established relationship, where this new thing may be, hey, is there opportunity here even to take it into some of those more well-established accounts, because obviously it has some momentum, but being able to really understand those two different dynamics, because what they're buying could be very different. Because a lot of times in your existing account base, you can get pigeonholed into you do X, Y, and Z, and it's very difficult to move those customers off that. Even if it's a huge revenue opportunity, they sometimes aren't going to think of you in a different way. Where new customers may have an expectation, may not, but at least you get to form more of that.
So that becomes part of your strategy.
Yeah.
Two sides of it. How do we change our positioning with our new clients? Or how do we set positioning with new clients? How do we change positioning with old clients? Again, looking back to look forward. Mike, what else do you have for us on this? Nothing.
I think
nothing.
I think one of the things to be careful about is if you spend too much time, let's say you're driving and you spend too much time looking in the rearview mirror, you might run into something. Now, so if we're driving and we're focused, let's say we're focused our attention forward, what do we need to do to be able to look in that rearview mirror? Where do we have to stop? So how do we create space and time for people to go through this kind of process of reflection and planning to help the business move forward? And if you're trying to make it happen as just this byproduct of, hey, it's something else that we're going to add to our daily workflow or our daily thing, you might be creating a situation where you're going to hurt your team. The other piece on reflection is you can't reflect on what you're going to do.
No.
So you got to go through, you got to make sure you've done it or have data to support doing it and take that action and then reflect on it. So take this same thing that we're talking about relative to the timing on strategic planning and executing, and shrinking it down, not only from an annual basis, but in a quarterly basis, and then maybe even a 2-week sprint basis, and start to identify where your feedback loops are through the process so that you make reflection part of your culture inside your business, how you do what you do inside your business. Those are a couple of the things I'd add.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you use the driving metaphor, you're like, that last road that we went on was way too bumpy. Let's get on the freeway, right? What don't we want to do? That last road was so windy, it made me sick to my stomach. I don't want to do that again. Let's go straight. Too many traffic lights. Great. Let's try a different path. So you don't want to stay stuck in the past, but you want to figure out what worked and what didn't. Last time we took the freeway, we were there in 5 minutes. Let's do that. Last time we took the freeway, we sat there for 5 hours. Let's not go at 8 a.m. That's the kind of looking back to look forward. Without doing what you said, Mike, because you cannot sit in yesterday. You can't do what you did last year just because you did it last year. And you can't keep looking back and wondering, why am I never going forward when I'm only looking in the rearview mirror? So I love that perspective.
I'm going to add one more to it. If, as a leadership team, you say, hey, we're all going to drive to New York, and everybody's driving to New York and everything's good. And then you're going to say, actually, we're going to drive to Oregon. And now it's like, ooh, shit, we got to turn around. And then, oh, you know what? I think we should be in Florida. And heck, wouldn't it be cool if we could go spend some time in Hawaii? Well, if you're not going to drive to Hawaii. So let's be realistic about how we're working through these changes that happen inside our business, and the time required in order to help those changes go through. And maybe another way to think differently about it is, what if you have an exploratory team that focuses on doing some of the new things while you have a team that focuses on keeping the business running? Because there are some people who really like to keep the business running, and there are other people who like to explore because they just don't like managing existing things. So just a couple of different ways to kind of look at this challenge, which is a very complex challenge. It does not have to be as complicated as you make it, though.
No, it doesn't have to.
I'd like to dovetail on the point that both of you just made too. Strategy in and of itself, I think a lot of people believe they can like do this in a 1 day offsite or half day offsite or something like that too. And it's incredibly hard to run a business and get really strategic and think about where, especially if you have to do acquisitions or major pivots, and a lot of companies are facing what worked for so long is not working. And this is really hard, and it is not a one and done. I mean, you can get a lot done and you can have a better year, right, this year because you did that 1 day planning and it got deep and so forth. But one of the things I really, when I work with people and we go in and I'm like, okay, so you're assigning these tasks to marketing downstream versus using marketing to make your strategy. So who is your target persona? What are your core values? What is the messaging, your positioning, right? A lot of this isn't done. This work it's inevitable that steps have been skipped, right? Because people are busy running a business. And in some cases, there's a moment where there's a gift market and they are making money hand over fist. They're not stopping to do this then, right? So one of the things I really recommend is to take bites at a time, right? Like really, you may be working on your core values and your purpose, or you may be working on your target persona, like really getting deep and having a very deep understanding of your target persona, and then messaging back to everyone in the company what they need to know about that and how it impacts their world, right? Like those things are kind of a step at a time, and they are just as important, and all these other things that we said you do, and how you apply your strategy, how you assign out the KPIs and create the tactics that you're going to do. Every one of these things makes one of those things easier. So just that it's not all one and done. It's incremental. You get there. You have to make assumptions from time to time and change. I think Chris said this earlier, change the assumptions because the market has changed, right? Or your competitors have changed, or your top client, maybe your whole 20% of top of revenue came through one channel or one client, and that went away overnight. Like these things happen. So you do have to change them. I just wanted to point out strategy is incremental, just like execution gets incremental.
Yeah, I think though, one of the things that you said is really important. Many of the clients that I'm talking to right now, the reason they're talking to me is because what they've always done doesn't work anymore. And what's alarming to me is how long this has gone on before they stopped and said, it's not gonna work anymore. Like, is it a year? Is it 2 years? Is it 3 years? Is it 5 years? How long do you continue down the path that you're going without really recognizing it's getting worse, not better? One of the companies that I'm talking to right now, I don't even know how to explain it, but their marketplace has shifted because the technology that they've sold into has changed. So the companies that do the technology that they have been supporting are now doing something so different that their technology isn't as relevant. So they either need to change their technology or figure out if somebody else can use their technology. But they've been traveling along this path, sort of shrinking and accepting it instead of going 3 years ago, this is coming. What are we going to do? And as we look at things like AI and we say, this is what we've been doing, this is how it's been working, how is AI going to change the world around us, what we sell, who we sell to, and so forth? And for some companies, that may not make a difference, but for others, it's going to be huge.
Well,
it's going to be a very small percent that it doesn't matter to.
Right.
Well, in terms of what their product is, in any case, but yeah.
Well, I always look at the most dangerous phrase in business is, we've always done it that way. right?
Right. And so when we talk about looking back, we're not looking back at we've always done it that way. Let's keep doing it this way. We're looking back for things that help us see this is starting not to work. This market
What
is slowing
assumptions? What
down.
assumptions did we have that were just proven invalid? Right? Like we made certain assumptions. Was there a point in the year where we would have had enough clarity to adjust? Right? Because I think sometimes it's also your strategy is not written and carved into stone. Right? Like if something isn't working, absolutely isn't working, and you can pinpoint the fact is that hey, it's not a matter of momentum. It's not a matter of we haven't invested enough here. It's a matter of this is the wrong approach. Then you have to make an adjustment. And that's not easy to do because you've probably invested a lot, but that's all sunk cost.
Liz, I'd just add to your, because I do think this is happening a lot where people are saying things that have always worked are just not working, or we just didn't have to do this much to get business before, some flavor of that, right? And I think I've been in these situations in a major company, in a major corporation. I worked in media, as when these things exploded, the media world changed drastically. And if I can share, one of the most important things to think about is you have to, while you still have momentum with what you've been doing, start figuring out whatever's new, because it's more expensive than what you're used to make that change. You probably need to hire some people that have that expertise. You probably need to bring in some technology. You have to have the revenue from what you have been doing before it goes too far down to finance what you need to be doing. And that is, I don't envy that decision. I don't at all. I try to help everywhere I can with it, but it is critical to success. And I think that a lot of people miss that window, and that's where the panic sets in.
There's a couple of challenges that happen. Some people don't like thinking this way. Some people can't think this way. And some people don't even know that there's the ability to think this way. And there's a couple of different categories that folks fall in. And unfortunately, what we do is we bring all of those people together to do some of this planning, and they're really not the right fit for the discussions. So take some time, pause, and ask, hey, can I actually define the process that gets me from point A to point B and create a predictable result? If I don't know that the process exists and it just is happening organically, then maybe get somebody else inside the group that has a view on process documentation or design to get involved in the conversation and kind of lay things out, work through things on a whiteboard as a team and put information down on paper. Could be digital or it could be on one of these old things, but make sure you've got the right people in the room. Make sure you're asking the right questions. Make sure you're clear about what the assumptions are that you're making. And if you do that kind of stuff, you'll make more progress. There's an awesome book to read. It's an old book, The Innovator's Dilemma by Clayton Christensen. Will help you think a bit differently about integrated systems and system design and process and system thinking. It's a relatively simple read. If you've not read it, pick it up. It's a good way to start. If this topic or this thing is super interesting to you, or you can work with any of the people that are on this call, because many of us are systems thinkers, as you probably can tell.
Okay. Any last thoughts on looking back to look forward before we move to our next episode?
I have one.
Yeah.
Make it fun.
Make it fun.
Make it fun.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this segment or this episode of the Sales SOS podcast. Okay, you guys, we're going to talk about expanding our client base as part of our plan for growth. That's our next segment. Welcome to the Sales SOS podcast. I'm Liz Hyman, your captain, I guess is my new title. And this is your crew, Chris Bowen, Mike Simmons, Renee Bigelow. And we've been talking in this little mini series about planning for the new year. We started with strategy. If you missed that, go back and listen to that. And then we talked a little bit about looking back to look forward. And now we're going to talk about looking at your existing customer base and planning that growth. I think that it's an area that we really miss out. I know that when I walk into companies and I start looking at where is their revenue coming from, if it's a $40 million company, I can often find $5 million worth of revenue sitting in their strategic or largest accounts that they're not strategically pursuing. But, Renee is a master of how do you grow your existing customer base? Because this is what the data shows us. The easiest sales that you will ever make are to happy customers. So you have to have happy customers, and then you need to leverage that. The second easiest sale that you can make, shortest sales cycle, most likely chance that it will close, is to a referral, which comes from happy customers or from a referral, a company that works with happy customers. And then the hardest is cold. Your lowest percentage, chance of success, the least likely that they'll be happy in the long run. So if we know this, if we know that the expense of a new client is so much greater than the expense of selling to an existing customer, we need to think about how, as we plan our growth, do we want to leverage our existing client base? So we have about 20 minutes, you guys, to master selling to your existing client base, which I think Renee could spend hours and hours and hours talking about. So Renee, I'm going to let you start.
Yeah. So we just talked in our last episode about one of the most critical things when things aren't working is to recognize that you need to invest in a new form of strategy, right? Before things are too down, right? And I'll expand on why I say that. Is there's an incredible amount of energy, right, in the world. I mean, like if I get all scientific or whatever, like things that hold energy, right? You have all of this mass of energy in what is working in your organization, and it can fuel new energy. The problem is there's often not a mechanism to capture and activate that energy. And if you do that, that's how you start getting referrals, right, Liz? Or you figure out often in your existing customer base are people who love you, right? They really love you. Even if what you're doing is a dying business, and I've worked with several since I worked in media, and people know that I know how to come out of that. I end up with people that call me for this.
Okay, wait. I just have to say I can top any of those because I worked with the Kodak department that was selling microfiche when CDs came out. So yes, they can still love you.
So they can still love you, right? Even when the writing is clear on the wall that the world is changing. When you still have those people who love you, consider them a network that you can start growing your new business from, not just a referral, but a network. Do they have vendors that would be the perfect partnership for you to go in? Do they have sister affiliates? Do they go to trade show or part of a trade organization that would be a perfect place for you to be a part of? You have to get really close to them. And Liz, you talk about this all the time, that we often get too far removed from our customers once we sell them, right? But if you really dive in and look at the people who love you and think about all the pieces of real estate or all the levers that you can activate with those people inside of a broader network, you often get a lot of momentum so that you start whatever you're doing so much stronger. So I'll stop there just because you're right. I could go on, but I want to hear everybody's perspective.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think one of the keys that Renee hit on there that most people forget is your customers want you to be successful. Because if you're not successful, you can no longer serve them. And if you can no longer serve them, they're in trouble. depending on how well you align to whatever their broader business objectives are. So don't forget that. Like that is I just want to, I think, what do the kids say? Double click on that point. I want to double click on that point for you all.
It's important. And an example of that, I had a client who was doing they had a foundry and they were making parts for big tractor trailer companies like Peterbilt and Mack Truck, and they kept getting pushed down on price and pushed and pushed and pushed on price, and they kept giving and giving and giving. And we started looking at the numbers, and we're like, you can't continue to exist at these prices. So they went back and said, hey, we can't, if we keep doing this, we're going to go out of business. And their response was, we don't want you to go out of business. So let's relook at this. How can we help you to continue to do this? So we think we have no leverage. We think that, if they tell us a certain price and they're a huge customer, we have no choice but to accept it. And it isn't true. And if it is true, then you need to be rethinking the direction of your business. I will tell you that I have walked into many businesses, looked at their customers, and realized that their largest customer, who makes up 20% of their revenue, leaves them in the negative. So they exist every day to pay the bills to support that customer, but there's no profit in it. So they make their profit off of all of their smaller customers, but they're afraid to fire the bigger customer because then they have to lay people off. But that logic doesn't make sense. You need to develop relationships with these largest accounts. If they don't see you as valuable, then you need to rethink it. But if they do see you as valuable, you need to work together with them to make sure that your business is profitable. It's not a win to them if it's not.
Yeah, and
I
with all
mean,
that, it doesn't have to be adversarial, right? Like you don't have to go to them and say, "Look, you got to change your price." You can just start thinking more strategically and be like, "What else do you offer that brings us value?" Right? Do we need, is your logo that important? Are you such a market leader that if we show that you're a customer, it's worth it for the loss? Then bleed that dry. Make sure it's everywhere. Make sure they agree to case studies and testimonials, and will speak at conferences about how much what you do for them helps them, right? Or can they make introductions into their sister companies or whatever else, right? It doesn't always have to be adversarial.
These are people who you've got access to, meaning you don't need to make assumptions around what's working, what's not working, why it's not working. Don't wait until you need to have the conversation though, because if, hey, we're running out of business and we need to bump everybody's price point up 10% at the end of the year or at their next renewal period, don't tell them the day before their renewal or when you send the renewal information out. Have that conversation in advance, set some expectations, figure out areas where you might be able to trade, to Renee's point and some of the other points that were made here. There are things that are extremely valuable to you that are throwaways on their side. And there are things that are extremely valuable to them that are throwaways on your side. And if you don't know what those trades are, you're not doing your job. Go out there and ask questions. And if you ask questions and listen and engage with people in a way that doesn't make your problem the customer's problem, it's amazing what will end up happening in those conversations. Ask the question, pause, listen to the answer, and then go deeper into the answer. Don't go looking for the thing that you want to hear. Be careful about the assumptions that you make and you go through that process. I'm going to get off my soapbox.
Well, I think it ties into another important point, which is what Renee said earlier, which is those relationships that we have with these very large accounts are really critical. You don't just serve them; you have to partner with them. And we got a phone call when my sister and I used to work together from a very large company, and one of their largest, in this division, one of their largest companies was talking to the competition. And so they came to us and said, hey, we need negotiation training. And we're like, you need negotiation training because a competitor came in at a lower price and now they want to look at your pricing. Too late. It's too late. This isn't about negotiation. This is about building relationships, building trust, understanding their business, knowing what's most important to them, understanding how you serve them in a way that isn't replaceable. But if you have an account that's that big and somebody else could come in and start flipping the switch on you because their price is a couple dollars lower, you haven't done your job. And all the price negotiating tactics in the world aren't going to save you.
Can I just stick up for a salesperson here too and say,
Oh, yeah.
this is not, these key accounts, that relationship is not solely on the salesperson, right? Like for these kinds of things that we're talking about, unlocking other value and these deep conversations, this should be a key leadership activity. Like if we're talking about what are the most important things to work on in a business, these are some of the most important things, and that's across the board. Does your product team talk to them? Do they know what's important? Do they consider their day-to-day life when they're building things out and like get to know them because it would help them learn other people, right? Does your marketing team really understand it, and are they looking at ways to showcase that this big key account uses you, right? Or does finance understand how they need to be billed if they have this really complicated PO process? Can we work with them? Like all of these things, every department really needs to pitch in, and the leadership has to drive that to get to
Absolutely.
this deep value, right?
I think you have to also, I think this is where a salesperson though does need to pick up the ball a little bit. And that is making sure that the other departments understand what you're doing inside that account and who at least from your perspective, who the players are, what they care about, things like that, then pulling in those other perspectives. I mean, and because you'll see sellers that get on edge a little bit when the CEO or CFO or your CMO wants to go meet with this customer and they're scared you're going to blow something up. Right. And it's like, well, then prepare me for the things that we should not talk about. What are we currently working towards? What are we currently working on? Maybe I can help you overcome some of those landmines. Maybe I can give them that executive, we're gonna make sure you're successful sort of speech and what we're willing to do from an investment perspective or what we're willing to go through. If as a seller you're not setting your leadership up with a clear understanding of the account, at least from your perspective, where the holes are, where the positives are, then you're also not doing your portion of that job. There's a way to pull all these people in to where you're going to get a net add as opposed to looking at the count getting more segmented.
Have an account plan. I mean,
Thank
like
you.
seriously, have a freaking account plan. And if you don't know what an account plan is, do some freaking research.
I can help.
Liz can help. Have an account plan and share that account plan. I think it's funny. Right when Renee started to say, "Hey, it's not just on you, the salespeople." I started to get triggered, and the thing that triggered me is there's so many of you sales professionals, sales reps out there who talk about this is my account. I own it. I'm the account owner. Okay, show me your account plan. Show me what you're doing. Show me how you're not going to fail alone. Show me how you're being a good stakeholder of the business, how you're being a good stakeholder of their business. So like we're talking a lot about business planning, strategic planning for the next year. What does your business plan look like for that specific account? What are their objectives? What's their strategy? How do you align with their strategy? Are you embedded in those tactics? These are things that you can do inside your account base and not sit back and wait for your leadership inside your organization to do it on your behalf. Take some freaking ownership. Anyhow.
Well, and I will say this. I mean, it is someone's account. Someone is the quarterback of that account, whether it is a sales rep or whether it's an account person or whether it's a customer success person. There is someone who must be the quarterback of that account. They must create a strategic plan for that account, or what I like to call a key account strategy. And they must use the entire team and manage that team. So it is not key account planning or key account management and growth is not tennis, solo tennis. It's football. And you're not blocking and tackling, but you're certainly working as a team toward a goal. And those goals need to be clear.
So, and build on that. Like you just said, there's a quarterback. So there's a quarterback who has a certain role that they're going to do in this thing. There's also an offensive coordinator. There's an owner. There are position coaches. There are people who are playing different positions. And if you don't know all of those characters that are inside, then again, how are you operating that team? How are you leading that team effectively? Know what your role is as you're going through it. So yeah, I think it's an awesome way to look at it, Liz. Like there's a quarterback that's out there who's going to quarterback this thing and is going to lead when we're out on the field. There's also somebody who's out there in the box watching
calling
down
the shots.
and can make some decisions because they can see the whole field. And then there's somebody who ideally hired the right people. And my team is the New York Jets, and our ownership sucks. There's a complete lack of leadership inside that organization. So I shouldn't even be talking about football.
I'd just like to throw in one other risk to what you said, because I do think this is out there a lot, Mike, of that's my account, I own it, right? Like I'm the person, has to go through me. I think that mindset started over decades ago, and somewhere around a decade or 15 years ago, people started moving in jobs much more often, right? So when you had somebody who was working for the gold watch and going to stay there their whole career, that was a totally different equation than now. The people, your sales rep leaving can take, if they are the only point of contact, you do not have a sticky account, right? They're going to go where that person goes because that's who they had the relationship. And worse, what if they are only dealing with one person on that side and that person leaves, right? You need multiple relationships totally intermingled, because it makes an account much more sticky. We talk about like all these extra features or things like that, or services that accounts use, and that makes them sticky. It's just as equal. How many people are they dealing with? And what are the relationships that are building, and how integrated are your companies together?
Go back and re-listen to that, because Renee just described what multi-threading is, and a lot of people are out there passing on bullshit about you need to multi-thread, but nobody describes it as simply as Renee just talked through it. Like that is multi-threading. Networking, building that network, building a plan, figuring out where the integration points are, pulling those things together, starting to pull on things like that is multi-threading. And a lot of people are out there talking about this, but they have no clue what it means. They think it's, hey, let me go find a couple of other contacts I can talk to. Hold on. Let's see.
No, so if you want to make it, there's a really simple way to start this process, and that is to make a list of all of the people in the company that you know and all of the people in the company that you should know. Then look at all of the people in your company and figure out who is the owner of which relationships, who and what should they be doing with those relationships. Some of those relationships are really good. Some of those relationships are really bad. So what do we need to do to improve the bad relationships? What do we need to do to win people on our side? What do we need to do to keep people happy? Start with a list, you guys. Start with a list, assign people to that list, and come up with a plan for, oh my goodness, a plan for that relationship. What do we need to do to keep them better informed? What do we need to do to make sure that there are no mistakes? What do we need to do with that person to improve communication? These things are important. Go ahead, Chris.
I had a thought and then it went away. But
It went away.
The bell took
it went away when my dad called. So
Say
that's
goodbye to the bell.
is
So
what it
let's
is.
do something else for a second. One last thing that I want to talk about before we get off this topic is one of my favorite things is white space mapping. And I think it's a word that a lot of people, they're like, what on earth? And it's the simplest thing. And it makes things so clear. If you take a list of your clients, you could just start with your top 5 clients, your biggest clients, and make a list of all the departments on one side and all of your products, or all of your products down on the vertical, and white space map it. They buy this from us and they're happy. They buy this from us and they're not happy. They buy this from our competitor and they're happy or they're not happy. They don't buy this from anybody. They make do with this, right? So you have what essentially it starts as a white map. You start filling it in and you look at all the white space. All that white space is potential for the future in a lot of your clients. And you can do that with an entire list. You could take an entire list of your clients and maybe cut off the last third of it because those are such small clients, it doesn't matter, and start looking for growth opportunities. Who's buying what? And you'll learn really interesting patterns when you do it. So I had one client that we did this with, and they kept telling me, we're going to sell into automotive. We're going to sell into automotive. So we did this white space map. We looked at we sorted it by industry. And I said, well, it's really interesting because all of your auto companies buy one product. But look at, and I forget what the other company was. I'm look at these. These companies buy almost all of your products for all of their employees. So why don't we go find more of these? And it completely shifted their strategy because they had a better understanding of what they had. White space mapping I think it's really fun. I think it opens up your eyes to things you didn't realize. And it's I don't know. I think it's really a fun thing to do. So if you haven't done it, now's a good time to start thinking about white space mapping. All right. Any last thoughts on growing our existing accounts? I think my one last thought is you need a plan. You don't just get clients and then think they're going to call you every time they need something. You need a plan for staying in touch with them. You need a plan for meeting with them. You need a plan for getting to them when they're at events or getting them to events. Somehow you need to have an engagement plan that helps your clients stay happy and buy more from you. And we often think, well, I don't want to sell. I don't want to always be selling to my clients. But if they have a problem and you're not there and ready to solve it, they're going to find somebody else to do it. So don't think about you're always selling to them. Think about you're always solving with them. And how do you create a strategy to be doing that?
Liz, can I leave this topic on an anecdote?
Yeah.
First of all, I'd like to share something from our conversations. When Liz and I are talking just together, often it's about our accounts. So we work together on some accounts. One line that we must say once every couple of months is that there are billions of dollars in unrecognized revenue out in the economy that are going unrecognized because people aren't managing these accounts well. Like, it's so much easier to sell to people who already not only know you but love you if you get these deeper relationships, right? And the one anecdote, we're on an account that Liz and I work together. We got deeper with, worked with them to get deeper in some of them, and even just in doing an interview for a success story, right? Like, we realized that this was the perfect person to give a success story because they loved us so much. In that interview, because I understood the goal, we got them talking more and found out that they could double the amount of people using the service that they had never thought about before, right? Because they were only thinking about this one solution that they had been buying and thinking of it in like the old way and not in a new way where more employees could benefit from it. And that was in one conversation by doing this sort of thing, right? Doubling that account. So, I mean, it really is a massive amount of unrecognized revenue just waiting for this.
I think that's a great place to wrap this up. Leverage your existing accounts and make a plan to leverage them. Thanks for joining us for this episode of Sales SOS Podcast. We are going to continue this series in our next episode, so we hope to see you there. Okay, setting goals. Hi, I'm Liz Hyman, and this is a Sales SOS Podcast. I'm here with your crew, Chris Bowen, Renee Bigelow, and Mike Simmons. And we've been talking in this little mini series about planning for the new year, about strategy and growth. And I want to get really practical right now. How do we set goals? Because I think this is where we get sloppy, right? We do what I call wagging, which, right, a wag is a wild ass guess, right? So we go out and we wag our sales team. We just made up a wild number, pulled it out of thin air, go do it. And there's no basis, there's no process, there's no strategy, there's a number, and it often sounds like 10% growth. We're just going to 10% growth next year, just 10%. Just add 10% to everybody's goals. If that's not the best way to do it, then what is? How do we set goals? How do we realistically set goals? And I want to really, Mike, this is your chance to just get super practical. Chris, I know you're doing this every day with your team. Let's get as practical as we can get in this session. So, Mike, do you want to start? He's staring at me. If you're not with me on video, the look Mike just gave me could have melted.
Melted. Wow. So I mean, I can tell you what the mistake I made last year with one of the clients I'm working with is we attempted to set goals based on general managers of each functional lines, the functional companies, providing their perspective of what could be true. And it was because we were late in the process. This year we did it completely differently. We went back and said to their reps, hey, what do you think is possible that's out there? So there are a number of ways to go through the process of doing it. What my preference is to get a view, I want to look at it through one lens. One lens is, what does the rep think is real? What does the market or the data tell us could be real? What do the people on the finance side of the business believe needs to be real? And then what do we as a leadership team think is reasonable? And we take all of those things together and put those brushstrokes up. We can get a better view of what the goal of the business should be, rather than one person just kind of putting their finger up in the air and saying like, hey, you know what? I think we should grow by 10% this year.
Yeah, I made that mistake with a client not too long ago, where the CEO and I sat down and said, how much should these accounts be growing? And they didn't hit any of those goals. He was super optimistic, but at least it gave us something to work toward instead of just having a generic number. We were able to look at each account and say, what's the potential? Maybe we didn't hit it this year. Maybe we'll hit it next year, but what's the potential for this account? And part of that is something very tangible. Like if you sell something that each employee uses, then the number of employees that could use that is a tangible number you can measure. And if a third of the people that could be using it are using it, what's the chance of getting the rest of those people? So starting with some tangible things that are happening in that account. You can't just go, oh, well, let's just grow with 10%. Well, if they're already at 100% and using all of your products, how are you going to grow it by 10%? You can't. What other things should we be, thinking about that are really practical for goal setting?
I'll add one. And this is also often from the marketing side, but I think it impacts the sales side a lot too. Don't set meaningless goals. Right? Like I'll use marketing as an example. Internally, we will track things to figure out if there are chances for optimization or levers that we can press a little more, or if they're not working very well, right? But those are not goals, right? Figuring out, once you kind of figure out some of those things that really do work and what you're trying to get to as a company, there's something right in there that is the goal, right? It may be not a metric as far as like a percentage or conversion rate or something like that. It may be that you're working better together with another department. That might be like the top goal. Whatever the goal is that the company's trying to hit, like what will make the most difference to get to that is the goal. That doesn't mean those other metrics don't exist. In marketing, you absolutely have to be data driven, but you also have to understand the limitations of a lot of that data. Like, I'll just give an example. I went into a company in the last year or two as email marketing has changed drastically with like Apple's privacy and others following suit, right? And they were still tracking, one of their top metrics they were tracking was email open rates. And I'm like, those are meaningless. Literally, like, it's not even that that's a bad goal. They're literally meaningless now because the way that email opens are tracked is not a, it's not a real number anymore. It gives you guidance, right? But the only reason we ever tracked email opens was nobody could click on something they hadn't opened, right? So it was just a leading indicator into what really mattered, right? So we knew what we would know to optimize, but it wasn't the goal, right? So it shouldn't be, it's a meaningless metric to put as a goal. It's a metric you track, but it's not a goal. Does that make sense?
It provides context of some sort, right?
Exactly. But it's not a goal. Even to, if you had somebody in charge of email marketing, you wouldn't put that as the goal, right? Like, because it's a meaningless number.
Yep.
Yeah. What other things should we be doing when we're setting goals?
Well, I know we talked about looking back. I still think sometimes you want to look back and say, hey, how did we do this before and what worked, right? Like if you go into let's go about with the lazy, we need to increase revenue by 10%. And that's what we did last year. And so what we ended up doing is we said, we're going to increase this by 10%. We raised all the salespeople's quotas by 10% to align with that goal. And we didn't do any real view of, okay, well, did anybody hit those? Under what circumstances? What's our level of confidence in it, those sort of things, to be able to say, oh, well, hey, we found out nobody hit those goals because they were unrealistic to begin with. There were some headwinds. Let's say it was this year and we had some headwinds and some deals that we thought would close in Q2 or Q3 are still open in Q4. And we're hoping that they'll close now. Right. And we don't know whether that's going to work out, but we're chasing things based off of maybe not even doing our homework for the way it really should work, the way we should be looking at these things. So.
If you have that situation where something hasn't closed in Q4 and you think it's going to close in Q1, do not add it to somebody's goal for next year. Like, come on. Like, what game are we playing when it comes to some of the setting someone's quota based on pipeline that's out there? That is a quick way to get people to not put stuff into the CRM
exactly.
late in the year.
Or if you or if your company if for whatever reason, because I've seen this at other places where you have people that'll poach accounts and things like that. Like, oh, you put this deal in and now that service line is chasing that account and they're going to say they're going to own it. And the rep doesn't get comped on it. Okay, well, now you're just not going to get those opportunities in your pipeline because now you set up a thing where that rep's going to be like, okay, if I put it here, it's going to get taken. I'm not going to put it there. And the same thing would happen to the sales leader would tell them to do that. Right. So you're building all sorts of negative incentives into your plan. I would say you should try to avoid that.
In addition to the don't add meaningless things, another one that I feel really strongly about and go, so much is contextual based on the situation in the company, right? But these two things, like don't junk it up with all the meaningless numbers, and then whatever you put as goals, celebrate incremental wins toward it, celebrate when you hit it, make it a big deal. Like, to me, that is the most underutilized piece of goals.
I think as you're looking at goals, particularly when you're looking at sales goals, I think it's important to break them down. How are you going to hit that 10% growth or whatever that number is? Are you doing it with this industry or that industry? Are you doing it with this product or that product? Do you want to sell more of this product because it's more profitable and less of this product because it's you make more, the revenue's higher, but the profit level's lower? And I think that every sales rep needs a territory plan. Whatever their little part of the territory is, they need a plan that helps them see how they're getting to where they're going. Because the fuzzier things are, the harder it is to achieve them. The clearer it is, the easier it is to achieve them. So if one of my goals is to find 35 new companies that meet this criteria and try to sell to them. I can do that. We want 35 companies that meet this criteria in this industry. Go find them and see if they're interested. That I can do, but sell 10% more. It's a really vague thing. So as we're thinking about how do you hit that number, the more clear, the more specific, the more detailed we can be about what activities do we need to do, what support do we need, which companies are we going after, which products are we selling, the easier it is to achieve it. Now, that's not to say it's always going to work out the way we planned, but having something clear to do makes it much easier to achieve it. That's my philosophy anyway. Go ahead, Mike.
If you're in a situation where you're going through this process with your team, and let's say you agree to a goal, whatever the goal is, and you've got this thing that's, maybe it's a SMART goal, so it's specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time bound.
Those are
So
so good.
you've got this goal that's out there. Don't feel like you have to define the strategy for the person that you're talking with or working with to achieve the goal. Give them the space to define their own strategy. Come up with their own metrics that they can hold themselves accountable to. This is where you get into that ownership of not only the ownership of the goal, but ownership of the plan that you use that you build to achieve the goal. And too often what ends up happening, especially with earlier career leaders and those who are high performers in individual contributor roles, is they will come in there and they will tell you, these are the metrics you need to hit. These are the numbers that you do. And this is how I went and did it. And you're not them. They're not you. Like, give your team some space. You'd actually be surprised at how creative people can get when they start thinking about the area that they're operating in. One of the things we've talked a lot about in this session over the course of the past hour and a half so far or so has been the idea of like strategy, tactics, planning, engaging with customers, getting out there in the field. When you work with your team and you talk with the people who are in the field doing this stuff on a day-to-day basis and give them the freedom to kind of think different and be creative, you'd be shocked at how they actually lead self in that operating environment.
Yeah. Well, it also enables us to support them better, right? So now they've said, this is how I want to do this. Now we can have a conversation. Great. What do you need in order to do that? What do you need marketing to do? What do you need me to do? What do you need accounting to do? What do you need to have happen in order to support you in achieving that? And it gives us a tremendous amount. You can also question, that looks a little low. What would we need to do to make that higher? That looks a little high. Are you sure that's realistic? Let's talk about it, right? It gives you a place to talk instead of just saying, here, go do this. And
Yeah,
nobody wants to hear, go do this.
I think it also gives you the ability for them to say, hey, here's an area where I know it's where we're going. Let's say it's something related to AI or something like that, but I don't feel like I have enough knowledge, depth, whatever. What is it that I can do to get that? Is there somebody else I need to pull in for those discussions, or is there something else that I need to do where I can get that knowledge?
And I
Right?
think that when you do a territory plan, part of that territory plan is the salesperson saying, what training, experience, knowledge do I need to gain in order to achieve that? So that's part of the what is required in order to get there. And I think that's a piece that's really missing. Is it's
Like when
not
I
just
build
here's your number. It's how
when I
do you
build out, sorry, Liz, didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm done. Go ahead.
When I go and look at account plans, but it could work for territory plans to a degree, is I'll go in and use our sales nav and look at who in the company is also connected. Is there somebody else who might have a better relationship, or a relationship I don't have but I need within that company? Okay, let me start figuring that out. Now, some of those are going to be BS relationships, right? They're just somebody that you're connected to and you don't really know them, but you're going to find some that are really, really solid, that it may be more long lived than your relationships. If you're not leveraging that, that's malfeasance on your part.
Chris, we talked in the last episode about how much momentum and energy there is to help you get new business inside the existing business that you have, more than just
Yep.
referrals, right? I will also say, I often say, I think there are billions of dollars left untouched because you aren't activating the employees inside of an organization to help you with that growth too, right? Like
Yeah.
if you do that, you often will see that customer you can't get a call into or whatever happens to be the next door neighbor of somebody like down in engineering, or they spend every Friday at their kids, rec league game together. Or here's one that from a customer that I did an interview with a while back. They do cornhole tournaments together and travel all over
Right.
all over the country together and do cornhole tournaments together, right? And spend all weekend together. Like there are so many ways to use the energy inside of your internal organization as well. And kudos to you for doing that. I think it's really underutilized.
Well, I think you have to be able. I mean, you have to try to uncover every rock, right? Like you may not find anything underneath that rock, but you have to look.
Well, and this is where we're really missing Bryn today, right? So if Bryn Tillman
Oh,
were
yeah.
here, she would be telling us to look in our LinkedIn and see who knows who in our companies.
Yeah, and it's not about exploiting a relationship. I want to make sure that I'm not talking about exploiting employees, right? Like if you were to go to somebody down in engineering and say, "Hey, we're trying to sell this new product that you all put together, and this person is one of our top prospects," they might have background information to share that would be helpful. They may be super excited to be a part of making it happen, right? Because they believe in the product and the company too. So it's not about exploiting. It's about taking advantage of the employees who are really happy there and using that enthusiasm they have and activating them and giving them a direction to put it in.
It is, is shocking the number of times that, I've had conversations with people inside organizations that I've had a chance to work with over a number of years where people struggle to see how the work that they do aligns directly with revenue, or how they could help the business grow, or how they can make an impact in certain ways. Now, there's also assumptions that get made around what salespeople do and what marketing people do and what customer success people do and what product people do and what everybody does in different ways, shapes, or form. One of the things that's helped me most in this area, get people rally around, is share a logo list of the companies that you would love to do business with, whoever they are, like just the top logos. We'd like to work with, Microsoft. I had this conversation with Sean just the other day. The New York Jets and the New York Islanders are two companies that we'd like to do business with from his perspective, because he's a fan of those teams. He didn't live out there like I did, but for whatever reason, he's decided to adopt the teams. When you share those logos with people, then they can start to think about, hey, this is how I interact with people around that group, or, oh, I use that product, or I do something, whatever. So when you share that broadly with the group, you'd be shocked at how many people will be able to rally around it, and it starts to become clear around, hey, I know somebody. Tell people what you're looking for, and you might be surprised on how quickly they can help you get it. Because people, I believe at their core, still want to help other people. They want to help people solve problems. They don't want to create problems. So this is an awesome conversation to have.
And it's not always a relationship, right? Sometimes it's like they have knowledge. Like your New York Jets example, it could be like a super duper fantasy football person who happens to know and understand how the organization works because they live and breathe it, right? That person probably lives and breathes the New York Jets more than anybody in the sales department. And they can really, like, they could look at your proposal and tell you what you're missing, give you some tips on how to talk with them. Like, it's all forms of energy that you can activate, right?
That's an awesome way to look at it. Think about that energy piece. And it's come up a couple of different times. Renee mentioned it earlier. The energy that gets activated. We're all looking for different ways to do it. And if you are part of an organization, you likely have the same email address domain, or your check comes from the same place. And this becomes a great way for you to work together as a team and be part of a team and engage as a team.
Well, thanks, you guys. Any last thoughts? We were talking about setting goals, and I think this idea of identifying who your target market is, like who your target clients are, that is about setting goals and being, I think the other piece that came out of this is let's be really visible to the whole company about what our goals are, whether it's about target companies or something else, because you don't know what the different people in your team may know. Somebody in accounting may know something about engineering that you had no idea, right? So set the goals, be open,
I've got
and work together.
Yeah, I've got one thing to add to some of the conversation that happened around, and I think it's super interesting that we talked about account planning and we also talked about territory planning, and some people will struggle with trying to kind of figure out how these all fit together. Think of, depending on your operating environment, but let's say we've got Liz's bookshelf up there. One of those books could be the territory plan. And then within it, the chapter can be the account plan. And then the pages inside each of those chapters end up being your call plan. And then these become this, as people would talk about way back when, a book of business. There's your book of business that falls into your territory plan. Or if you're, depending on structure of organization, it might be the entire Encyclopedia Britannica. And yes, there used to be encyclopedias that would go on a bookshelf behind where Liz is sitting that you could go in and you could bring into your house and have all this knowledge there. So now you've got this encyclopedia, which might be your multiple territory plans that you have across an organization. You can start to simplify this approach. And if you simplify your approach to thinking about your territory, your accounts, your engagements with customers, your goals and objectives, and the alignment that you have across your team, it'll be amazing what you'll be able to accomplish as you shift into this next quarter, this next year, this next couple of years.
I'd like to dovetail on that, and maybe Liz, this could be a topic altogether to do soon. But y'all know I'm going to say something about culture here. But sales teams in particular respond, I think, the best to introducing this with some sort of excitement. Right? You could come into a sales team and dictate these goals for next year, and I think it will fail in most cases, right? I mean, everybody's got families to feed, so some people will pull it off. But if you plan an offsite and you like as Chris pointed out early, a couple episodes ago, how important it is to share the vision and make people excited and talk about some of the tools and the ways that you think you can get there before you ask them to go do this deep work on their account strategy and their territory strategy and their call plan and their whatever. If you got to go in and do all that extra stuff on top of the things that you're thinking about you got to do to close out the business this quarter, get them pumped. Sales teams respond really well to a very strategic offsite to like get them ready for whatever these goals are. I think like what would go into a good sales offsite would be a great topic at some point.
Let's do it.
If you're thinking about sales kickoffs, listen to that. Like, don't design your sales kickoff based on the way a lot of people typically design their sales kickoffs. I think that could be a really, really interesting conversation around like good, bad, ugly when it comes to that kind of stuff, and how to avoid that.
Yeah, I just think we should take our entire team down to Cancun and book every single minute that they're there. So they get there, they land, they spend the night, they get up in the morning at 7 a.m., they work until 9 o'clock at night and never get to see Cancun.
Well, and maybe what we do is we just have people shouting at them from the front and just kind of beating them over the head in the same way that we could do in a virtual meeting like we do every other week. And we'll just keep pushing that stuff out there, because if we do it in person, it'll be received a little bit better. Let's not take advantage of the fact that they're together and they can actually engage with each other and have a little bit of fun.
I think we can have a really good time.
You feed them good food. If there's one thing I know about sales,
you have to feed them.
You have to feed them.
All right, well, let's wrap this up. This is our wish for you for the new year. We hope that all of you have a successful new year, and that you launch your new year effectively and you come out of it with what you and your team hope to achieve. So we hope we've been helpful in doing that, and we will see you in the new year in our next episode of Sales SOS Podcast. Happy New Year, everyone.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.